Hello, Hey Boomer community. My name is Wendy Green, and I am your host for Hey Boomer. And Hey Boomer is a show for people who have retired, who are thinking about retiring, and they are asking themselves, what's next? It is a eternal question because we are always going through life changes. But in this, we are talking about in our 55 and over age group. So this month, our focus is on reinvention. And we hope that at the end of every show, you leave inspired to recognize that your life can be the way you want it to be and be an inspired life in this next stage. Support for Hey Boomer comes from Rhodes Scholar, the not-for-profit leader in educational travel for boomers and beyond, offering expert-led travel and to all 50 states and more than 100 countries. You can check out the Rhodes Scholar National Park trips as well as all of their other trips by going to Road, R-O-A-D, scholar.org/heyboomer. And another sponsor that we have is called Real Eats, E-A-T-S, Real Eats. And Real Eats provides organic food that is packaged for meals. It's meal-sized food. And I have been so impressed. It's, like I said, it's organic, mostly locally sourced from areas around where they are in upstate New York. All the packaging is recyclable and compostable. And the meals, they're so simple. They come in little plastic bags that you can boil and they're ready to go. So if you are tired of cooking or you have some nights during the week when there's just no time to cook, Real Eats is a great alternative. I am going to post the link for Real Eats in the show notes, and I will also post them on the Hey Boomer Facebook page. And as I said, the show is for people over 50 who are looking to reinvent for what's next. And I wanted to tell you that the group coaching experience that I put together called What's Next is going to be starting another cohort on August the 2nd. This is an experience where we go through 6 weeks of programs and exercises on conversation and live coaching. Very insightful experience for the people that have been part of the program. And you leave there with a 6-month and a 12-month plan to kind of get you kickstarted into this next chapter of your life. Obviously, everything is always revisable, but it's a great way to start to think and look back. So if you're interested in that, you can email me at wendy@heyboomer.biz, or you can check out the Facebook, the website at heyboomer.biz/coaching. And then we can chat, 20-minute free conversation just to kind of see where you're at, to get to know each other and see if it makes sense for you. So I am ready for some never too old stories. Are y'all ready for some never too old stories? Everybody likes those. So my first story is about a Tough Mudder race, M-U-D-D-E-R. Have you ever heard of it? Tough Mudder races include obstacles like giant ice baths, a dash through 10,000 volts of electricity, and climbing up a 12-foot ladder. Not something I want to do. But 83-year-old Mildred Wilson of Missouri, who is better known as Muddy Mildred, completed her third Tough Mudder course last month. Mildred holds the title for the oldest person to complete a 5K Tough Mudder. Her son was a Tough Mudder competitor, and Mildred went as part of his pit crew on one of his races. She loved it and told him that she wanted to try. So to begin training for this, she went to the YMCA and told them she needed to strengthen her upper arms in order to be able to complete the course and climb over all the stuff she has to climb over. So Mildred's advice for anyone who is older that might want to do something like this, anybody listening want to do a Tough Mudder? Well, she says, I think you can do just about anything you plan for and want to do if you have the desire and determination. Her son runs alongside her as her pit crew when she is competing. Mildred only competes in Missouri, but her son Dani does travel to Tough Mudders and other locations. So you can do anything you want to do, according to Mildred, if you have the desire and determination. My second never too old story is about the women of Gee's Bend, which is a small, remote Black community in Alabama. And they have created hundreds of quilt masterpieces dating from the early 20th century to the present. And they have a book, Gee's, Gees, Gee's Bend, The Women and Their Quilts, tells the story of this town and its art. Gee's Bend quilts carry forward an old and proud tradition of textiles made for home and family. They represent only a part of the rich body of African American quilts, but they are in a league by themselves. Few other places can boast the extent of Gee's Bend's artistic achievement, the result of both geographical isolation and an unusual degree of cultural continuity. In few places elsewhere have works been found by 3 and sometimes 4 generations of women in the same family, or works that bear witness to visual conversations among community quilting groups and lineages. Gee's Bend art also stands out for its flair. Quilts composed boldly and improvisationally in geometries that transform recycled work clothes and dresses, feed sacks, and fabric remnants. The economic benefits for the quilters, however, was minimal, but now, thanks to a foundation established in their honor, the seamstresses are able to earn a living wage making their quilts. Sometimes when you're laying down and you're sleeping, you have a good idea and a thought just comes into your mind and you just get up and you just do it, says Gee's Bend quilter Stella Mae Petway, who's 70. That's what happens when you're feeling inspired about what's next. So I'm going to bring Dani on.
Hi.
Hi, Dani.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let me say a few words about you and your book.
Okay.
So, garden porn. That's how a librarian described Dani Baker's new book, The Home Scale Forest Garden: How to Plan, Plant, and Tend a Resilient Edible Landscape. And it is indeed garden porn because of the photographs, which are not only beautiful, but they also offer a sensuality that exposes you to the intimate nature of some of the plants and the pollinators that inhabit the Enchanted Edible Forest. We're going to get into some conversation about the edible forest in the book, but I also want to talk to Dani about reinvention she went through when she left her practice as a clinical psychologist. Right. So Dani worked in diverse settings, including consulting to Head Start programs in the South Bronx, managing a day treatment program for developmentally disabled adults, doing some college teaching and outpatient therapy, and in the final years of her career, she served as a forensic psychologist in the New York State prison system. She also pursued a side business as a nature photographer, hence the garden porn pictures in her book. Oh, goodness. So she was wondering, like, what am I going to do when I retire? So she and her partner decided to buy a 102-acre dairy farm. And she tells me that they didn't expect to farm it. What were your thoughts when you bought this 102-acre dairy farm?
Well, it wasn't an operating dairy farm. The farm had gone out of business as a dairy 50, 60 years before. It It was just the land. So I thought maybe, I was very concerned about what I was going to do after I retired with my time. And I only had a very small lot in town where my house was, and I knew it just wasn't enough for me. So I thought 100 acres, I could wander around, maybe do a little landscaping, maybe have a couple of horses, and I'd have outdoor recreation. So we bought the property.
That's a lot of land to go from a little
It was.
half-acre plot of land to 100 acres.
It took a while for me to wrap my head around it. I would wander around. I'd sometimes get lost on the property because it was so vast in my experience, but I eventually figured it out. Yeah. And we weren't planning to be farmers at first.
Okay. So you were a therapist.
Right.
And now you're like going to leave. Were you living in the city then as a therapist?
A small town.
A small town.
Very close to the land, like 10 minutes away by car.
Okay. So it wasn't like a major culture change.
No.
All right. But what kind of inspired you to think I need 100 acres?
Well, I knew myself, and I knew that I don't do well with idle time. Like if you give me a beach vacation, where you lay on the beach, I'm depressed within 24 hours. I just knew for my mental health, I had to be busy. I had to feel productive in some way. So we bought the land, and I was still working. And we noticed some vestiges of the old farm, an old fence post here, an old piece of equipment there. And we took a class at the local cooperative extension called Building Your Small Farm Dream. My partner had a childhood dream of having an organic farm, and I always enjoyed gardening vegetables. So we decided to try our hand at farming, and we did it for a year. We grew some vegetables; they sold well, and we decided to expand the garden. And then I realized this is the answer to my retirement dilemma of what am I going to do with my time? Because when you're a farmer, you don't have any extra time. You're busy 24/7. So it was like problem solved. So we developed the farm, and we eventually added animals and expanded the garden. And then in the 7th year.
Wait, before you get there.
Okay.
I know. So you had some experience with growing crops and trees and stuff as a child. Would you talk to me about that?
Sure. Well, when I was 5 or 6, my parents bought a newly built house that was built on half an acre that had been a cornfield. So there was no landscaping at all. It was just in sod. And I was the oldest child. This was the 50s. So my father, who had had a heart attack when we were preschoolers, in those days, they told men, just take it easy for the rest of your life when they had a heart attack. So he didn't do any physical labor. And my mother was a very petite woman. So I got the job of digging the holes for all the trees and turning over the sod for all the vegetable garden and all the flower gardens, and then tending all those things for the next several years until we moved to a city when I started high school, when I was around 13. So from around 6 to 13, I worked very hard at that, and I loved it.
And you loved it. So
Yes.
that is something that you talk about in your book, and I talk about with my clients, is that a lot of times when we look back at our childhood and things that we loved then, we find an answer for what's next.
Yeah.
Are you finding that's true?
Well, even in college, I was quite unhappy in college, and I don't remember this, but my sister and my college roommate both independently remember me fantasizing about wanting to be a farmer, even in college. But I was the first generation to go to college in my family. So that wasn't something I could really seriously talk about. Right. My parents expected me to be a professional, not a manual laborer, right?
Right.
So I just kind of stuffed it until I had the opportunity. When I was in my late 50s, actually, is when we started the farm.
Okay, so you did the farming and you got certified as an organic farm.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you were doing all annual vegetables at the time, and some animals.
Yep. My partner takes care of the animals.
Okay. And so were you selling all of the stuff you grew on the farm?
Oh, yeah. Well, my partner's idea was we'll grow stuff and we'll eat what we want and then we'll sell the rest. I said, no. We'll sell everything we can, and then if there's anything left, we'll eat it. So that's how because I'm more of a business head. So we started, that's the way we started. Now I'm a lot more liberal. I eat some myself before I sell it, but 17 years later, it's about time, right?
Yeah, that's right. You're supposed to sustain yourself as well. So tell me what happened in the 7th year, Dani.
Well, I always like to um, expand my knowledge of various things regarding agriculture. So there was a course offered, a 2-hour class offered at the local cooperative extension on the subject of permaculture. Now, I'd never even heard the word before, but I decided to go see what it was about. And before the class was over, I mean, the ideas were they made so much sense. It was like a revelation to me, modeling a garden after a forest edge and incorporating all of the things that nature incorporates so it takes care of itself. It just made so much sense to me that before the class was over, I decided I was going to plant an edible forest. And I came home and I told my partner I need a fence because you got to keep the deer out. We have a lot of deer pressure here on Wellesley Island. So he built me a fence and I started planting my garden, and the rest is history, I guess. That was 10 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, it's 10 years.
10 years. Yeah. This is the 10th year of the garden. Yep.
So you're not doing the annual
Oh,
vegetables
well,
anymore?
I was doing both. And as a result, the weeds kind of got away from me in both venues. Because I had two full-time jobs with the annual vegetables. Now I had 4 full-time jobs with the
Yeah.
edible forest. So it was kind of, but this year, because of the book and the time I'm going to be spending marketing it, I cut back by about 3/4 my annual vegetables, which I had wanted to do for years, but I didn't dare do it because the vegetables are what support the farm. So
Really?
yeah, but now I have income from the book, so I can get rid of the vegetables, or most of them. Most of them, I have enough for us and for the stand, and for sell to a restaurant now and then. I have enough.
And are you growing food you can sell in the edible forest?
So much of it. In fact, I just had a big order from a local restaurant, first order of the season, because this is a seasonal area, and I harvested about 12 different kinds of herbs for him from the edible forest and berries, honeyberries. Yep,
Really?
yep.
So are you doing this by yourself, Dani, or do you have help?
I don't have any hired help. I
No
have an
hired
occasional
help?
volunteer um, who helps me. But years ago, Dave and I decided we had a couple who were supposed to come and stay 2.5 months, and they stayed like a week and left. And at
Oh,
that point, we decided we're not going to rely on volunteers. We're going to whatever we take on, we're going to be able to do it just the two of us. And if we happen to have volunteers, that's when we can do the extra stuff.
wow.
So Dave and I pretty much managed the whole thing ourselves. Yes.
Okay, so that's a lot of work, right? So tell me about your day. You get up in the morning and
Well,
what goes on?
I get up around 4 a.m.
Okay.
I meditate for 30 minutes. Then I take a walk. Got to get my 7,000 steps in. Then I do a weightlifting routine. Then I do a yoga class. Now it's
Wow.
7 o'clock. If I have time, like this morning, I had time in between. I harvested, and then I have breakfast, and then I actually have a volunteer living in at the moment. So she and I spent some time. What did we do first? Oh, we started the drip irrigation, and we put a huge row cover over my winter squash crop so the cucumber beetles don't get to it. And then we worked on a rack card promoting the edible forest. She's the marketing person, so we worked on that. Then we went out to the garden and we sheet mulched one of my beds in the edible forest, and then I came in and had lunch, and here I am.
So every morning you go through that meditation and yoga and
Yeah, I do.
so that's
I have to,
nice.
I'm 73, and I have arthritis in my hips and my shoulders, and unless I work my muscles regularly and keep them strong, I would be disabled physically. So I'm very motivated to keep my body fit. Yeah.
And then the work that you do in the garden, does the yoga and all help that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
You
mean,
asked me, I told you that's my routine.
well,
Yep.
no, I mean, I
Yep.
think that's awesome because you are doing self-care,
Right.
and
Right.
I suspect that you think of the edible forest as self-care as well.
Well, it's an inspiration for me. I mean, I love being there. I get lost there sometimes. I'll go out with a goal in mind and I'll wander around and like I'll come back to the house and 2 hours is gone. Like where did the time go? I just really it's a magical place, honestly. And I'm not just saying that. Many people who visited my garden have spontaneously called it magical. So
Mm.
it's not just me. It's just well, think about, if you walk down a wooded path, you're just feeling this ambience, it's transporting, right?
Yeah.
So that's what my
Yeah.
garden's like.
But it wasn't when you started.
No, it was not. But,
Tell me about that.
well, I had to study the land. I studied it for a good year because when you plant a garden like this, you have to understand all of the different microclimates on your land so you can choose plants that you can match your plants with their most beneficial environments. So yeah, and I was reading a lot of books because I only had a 2 hour class in permaculture. So I bought a bunch of books. I read them not only about the concepts of permaculture, but about all of the different plants I could grow. Because 95% of the plants I ended up planting, I'd never seen or heard of before. But
Oh,
if I read about them in a book or a catalog and I thought I could grow it in my very cold climate, I'm zone 4 up here, which means our winters can go average between minus 20 and minus 30. That's the average low temperature in the winter here. Anyway, if I thought I could grow it, I decided to buy it and try it.
okay.
So,
So you don't go outside and do farming in that kind of winter weather, do you?
well, there are things to do in the winter for
There are.
sure. I mean, we cross country ski every day if there's snow, for one thing. But we have animals year round, so they have to be cared for, every day. And
Yeah.
then in the garden, um, I do have to check on things in the winter.
Huh.
Well, first of all, the falls have become so temperate here that I can work garden because it's above freezing. And then when it gets cold, if it snows, I have to go check to make sure my trunk guards are not covered by snow so the mice don't get to the trunks of my trees. And I have to make sure the deer haven't come in. And
Oh.
I also like, sometimes it's fun to wander around in the winter and just take photos of like fox tracks or interesting branches of a bush or a tree or some wildlife or
So there's you reminded me of the photos,
yeah.
but go into a little bit more explanation about what permaculture means, what that is.
Okay. Well, permaculture is very broad. I mean, it's I don't want to I really can't tell you what all that means, but I can talk about how it applies to growing things.
Okay.
So basically you're modeling your garden after nature. So you're building in plants that supply all the nutrients that your food bearing plants need, because in nature nobody fertilizes, right?
That's
The
true.
trees
Yeah.
and the bushes have berries with no help from anybody. Okay. And then you build in other plants that suck up nutrients from the subsoil. Besides nitrogen, all the other nutrients become available when the leaves of those plants die down in the winter and
Mm.
decay and provide those to the other plants around. And then you have lots of flowering plants that attract your pollinators, but also beneficial insects that will prey on the bad bugs, the ones that you don't want, the ones that like caterpillars, the ones that
Mhm.
eat your vegetables, right? Or
Right. Those
the
squash
leaves of your
bugs.
trees, right? So you invite those in by having plants that attract them. And then you also attract wildlife. So frogs, snakes, birds, toads, newts, anything, spiders, all the beneficial bugs too, that will help keep things in balance for you. So you're not going to, I mean, we're certified organic anyway, but you don't even organic, even stuff that's approved by organic, you're not going to need to fertilize, you're not going to need to spray, you're not going to need to use fungicides, none of that. Takes care
Hmm.
of itself. And you build it mirrors a forest edge. So not only do you build horizontally, but you build vertically. So you're going to use all the vertical space. So in my garden, I have trees that might grow to be 100 feet tall eventually. And then I have the understory, which is mostly fruit trees from maybe 10 to 30 feet. Then your shrub layer, then your herbaceous. Those are plants that die down in the fall and grow again in the spring. And your ground covers, root plants and vines, and even mushrooms.
Wow.
So all of that.
And you say that this is the home scale forest garden.
Right.
So I think I mentioned to you, I have a fig tree, I have butterfly bushes, I have some strawberry plants, but they're all kind of in different parts. You know, I have a small lot.
How big is it? Do you know? Like eighth of an acre?
Maybe a quarter of an acre.
Oh, that's not a small lot to me.
Oh.
No, that's lots of space to grow stuff.
But they're all scattered around. I mean, I don't know how to.
Well, what do you have along your foundations?
I have the butterfly bushes. I have the wildflowers there. The fig trees in the back and the strawberries are in the back.
Well, you could do, I mean, home scale means it can be just around your house. So you can do a foundation planting if you have a 20-foot long foundation. I have one bed in my garden as a demonstration where I have all 7 layers in 20 feet, 20 by 6.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you don't have the overhead space, that's okay. You can just go up to the shrub layer, or you can have a dwarf tree. That's cool. In your front or backyard, you could have one fruit tree surrounded by other like berry bushes and some herbs, that edible greens, there are many perennial vegetables that you plant once and they come back for you every year. Like, you know, you can plant spinach every year, or you can grow good King Henry. You plant it once, it's like spinach. And I was cutting it in April. And I didn't plant it this year. I planted it 3 or 4 years ago. There's Turkish rocket, which simulates like a broccolia that comes back year after year. There's something called sea kale, if you like kale.
So do these perennial vegetables not need as much sun as the annuals?
You know, that's a good question. Some of them can take some shade. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. They can take all the ones I just mentioned can all take some shade. In fact, they're in a semi-shaded spot and they're doing fabulous.
Okay.
And so, and you plant stuff really close together. So, you know, it's all massed together, you know, and initially you use a lot of mulch. I like wood chips to keep the weeds out. But when the plants kind of touching each other and there's not any light coming down to the ground for weeds.
So I shouldn't do like everybody does in the suburbs, and when the leaves fall, rake them up and bag them up.
No, that's the best mulch and fertilizer. No.
Leave them there.
Leave them there. Or rake them if you want them off your lawn, rake them and throw them on your garden.
Yeah. Yeah. So I should figure out what I can plant underneath my fig tree.
Oh, you can totally do. How big is your fig tree?
It's gotten big.
Wow. Okay.
I know. It's such a beautiful tree.
Well, if you look at my book, you might get some ideas.
Yes.
Well, I put under there.
I haven't looked all the way through it, but I love it. So tell me about the photography. How did you get involved in that?
Well, Dave and I took a trip to Costa Rica. This was this is back in, I think, 99. And we're in some building and there's an owl sitting up on a ledge. And I said, I wish I had a Zoom. I wish I had a Zoom, because I just had a little point and shoot. I wish I had a Zoom. And that Christmas, Dave bought me a fancy camera. Yeah. So I had a camera. And then I'm driving to work one day to one of my prison facilities, and in a culvert, this is like March, on the side of the road, you can still see snow. There's a family of foxes sitting there. A mother fox and 3 babies. So I'm in my car. I let go of the wheel. I'm like this because I have my camera with me all the time. And I'm trying to get a shot of these foxes. Meanwhile, there's a tractor trailer behind me. I didn't even know it. And you know, he's like, anyway. And I looked at the photo and it was actually a wonderful. They were looking at the tractor trailer. So they were all looking in this. All the foxes were kind of like they were posed. So I called it Fox Family Portrait. And the people at the facility, it was right near the prison. It was a family that the superintendent had been feeding. So a lot of people knew about the foxes. So I printed up some 8x10s and I sold 20 copies of this fox picture. So that kind of inspired me. And I always enjoyed nature. So I did a lot of nature photography, and I just had my camera with me all the time. So on the way to work when the sun was rising, on the way home when the sun was setting, those are the best times of day to take photos. I just take, and it took no time. I had some artistic talent, but I didn't have time to devote to painting or sculpture or anything like that. So this way I could exercise that creativity in 2 seconds. Hop out of the car, take the shot, and get back in the car. And the trick to being a successful photographer is you have to edit yourself mercilessly. So let's say I took 100 shots, maybe one of them would be good enough to show somebody.
Wow.
So as a result, I had one person shows all over the North Country. I mean, I framed my work and I had all these shows and da. But after 7 years, it was apparent that I wasn't going to make any money at it. Plus, we started the farm and I didn't have time anymore to do that.
Well, but you've taken some amazing pictures on the farm.
Well, thank you. Yes. Well,
oh, yeah. Do you sell any of those?
I haven't tried to. I'm selling the book. Come on. They're full of those pictures. Actually, that's one of the things that sells the book because people flip through it and it's so beautiful. It's like irresistible, So that's my story about photography. So, yeah.
So you're still playing with it. You're still playing.
Well, it's a way for me to exercise my, whatever innate talent I have. I'm very good at composition. I don't know anything about the bells and whistles of the camera. I just set it on automatic and that's it.
Okay, so you didn't take a class in
I did, but in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in technology at all. And I just don't process it. So, I just point and shoot.
Much more interested in what you can grow and how you can grow it.
Yeah. And how I can compose the photo.
And how you can compose
the right light and the right,
Yeah.
The whole trick with photography is simplify.
And do you edit? Well, no, you probably wouldn't edit your photos because you don't like the technology.
I don't. Nope.
It's how they are is how they are.
As is. Yep. I might crop slightly. That's it. But no Photoshop. No. That's
awesome. So I mentioned to you also that when I was in college back in the 70s, I was living on some land that we rented, and I tried my hand at organic farming, not very successfully. So I'm just curious about how long does it take, or did it take you guys to kind of learn the techniques that you needed to be certified as organic farmers?
Oh, well, the certification is a paper process.
Yeah.
Basically, so that, getting certified is just, doing all the documentation and this and that and submitting it and, having them come inspect and make sure that you're not violating any of the rules. But your question really relates to how do you become a successful farmer?
Right. And the answer organic is, farmer.
Right. Well, any kind of farmer, actually. You have to observe and you have to adjust and learn from stuff. And I mean, my learning curve was super steep at first. It's still pretty steep with the edible forest. Now with the annual vegetables, I'm pretty good, but if I forget something I learned, then I have a problem again. So like this year, I planted some squashes and I didn't cover them, and which I knew I should, but there was reasons. It was in I didn't cover them with row cover. It was in a location which was kind of hard to cover, and they got molested by cucumber beetles. And I knew that could happen, but I didn't do what I already knew, and there you are. So
well, and then so much of it depends on so many variables. I mean, sometimes I'll plant tomatoes. Yeah. I'll have this incredible crop.
Right.
Other times, I can barely get a tomato to bloom.
Well, it's that's why diversification is very helpful. And in the edible forest, I have over 300 different kinds of plants. So if the weather in a given season isn't conducive to, let's say, my fruit trees, I have all these berries, or vice versa, or I have all the herbs, and of course they ripen at different times of year and they flower at different times. So if there's a hard frost in the middle of May, that might zap my peaches, but it's not going to affect my elderberries because they flower till June or late June. So, it's the diversity, and also in annual vegetables, diversity helps. But hey, I've had the same issue last summer. In the middle of the summer, we had a cold snap that lasted 12 or 14 days, and my tomatoes did not set fruit right between July and August. And then a disease called early blight since the plants weren't growing either, kind of came up from the ground and took over and killed the plants. So I didn't have any more tomatoes after midsummer. So see, even experienced gardener, I'm very relaxed about this stuff because it's just like I can't control it, so I just have to accept it. What am I going to do?
Boy, there's a life lesson, huh?
It took me 73 years to learn it.
It applies to life as well as to gardening.
Of course,
You
of
can't
course.
control it. You have to accept it.
That's right. And the quicker you do it, the better off you are.
Yeah. So I'm curious. That just brings me to the whole psychology. That was your field. That was your specialty. So, what lessons have you learned that you can apply to life, or have you learned in life that you apply to the garden?
Well, somebody asked me this recently, and I came up with this answer that I thought was kind of clever. So, they asked me, well, similar to your question. So, when you're dealing with plants, you have to have a lot of empathy for the plants, so you can understand how they're feeling and why they're feeling that way. And if they're not feeling happy, you have to figure out what's making them unhappy and what you can do to help them. And there's no difference between that and being a shrink, is there?
Except, do you sit down and talk to your plants?
I talk while I'm working with the plants. Okay. I'm not sure I'm talking to them. I'm kind of talking to myself, but I do verbalize a lot when I'm in the garden, I must admit.
And they say plants like that, right?
Well, yeah, they like the contact, they like the human contact, I think. Yeah, they don't, if you neglect a garden, it's going to go to pot. Right. You have to be there and pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dani, you said you're 72?
73.
73.
I'll be 73 and a half. I was just singing a very, very happy birthday to me because I have a date to do a presentation about the book on July 22nd, which is my half birthday. I just made that date today. So anyway, yeah, I'm 73.
Okay, so any thoughts about a second retirement and what that might look like?
I can't, no. I mean, I'm slowing down. I can tell my body isn't what it used to be 10 years ago. I don't have the stamina. I work 2 hours. I need a break now. I don't work from dawn till dusk. I quit at 5 usually, so I mean, I'm cutting down on my physical labor, but I'm doing other things, I'm putting PowerPoints together so I can talk about my book and doing readings and, planning, my marketing strategy. So that's a whole new transitional adventure, the marketing of the book, right. And then I'm already planning my second edition
of the book.
Yes.
When did you have time to even write this book?
Well, I was very disciplined about it. Any of you out there listening who want to be authors, I was very disciplined about it. First, I wrote the proposal and I had it accepted. I was invited actually to submit a proposal to the publisher. She heard me give a PowerPoint, and anyway, at a training convention for organic growers. So anyway, once the proposal was accepted, I negotiated a contract that only gave me 4 months to complete the entire manuscript. So I decided that I was going to write a chapter a week. I had 10 to go. I wrote 2 for the proposal. So I had 10 chapters to go, a chapter a week, which meant 1,800 words a day. So I'd get up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I'd do my routine. I'd start to write. And I'd write until I did my 1,800 words. And if I finished the chapter before a week was up, I took a day off. And if I didn't, I didn't. And so it took me 2.5 months, and I wrote the entire book. And then I still had a month and a half before the due date to put the whole manuscript together, to get it in the right format, to put my work, get my appendices, my glossary, and my resource lists, and my bibliography, and all that stuff together. And so that was it. But I'd been thinking about it for years, and I'd been giving PowerPoint. So I'd been verbalizing this stuff. So it wasn't like totally out of the blue. Plus I had all my pictures to write from. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if I had 2 pictures there, that was my 1,800 words for the chapter. No, just kidding. But it was, and also the requirement for the proposal was to do what they called an expanded table of contents, which was essentially an outline of the entire book, a detailed outline. So I wrote a 7.5 page single spaced expanded table of contents. So every chapter had about half a page. So I had an extended outline to work from. So, all of that helped, and it was done.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you are very intentionally now recognizing some of the areas you have to slow down. So making another pivot to, I'm going to be an author now. I'm going to be an educator. I'm going to be a marketer. So I love that. So Dani, Hey Boomer is about that. It's about reinvention. It's about staying engaged. So if you could leave 2 or 3 takeaways with the audience today, what would you say?
Well, follow your passion, but it's really important to stay fit, to stay healthy. So take care of your body, take care of your social, your psychology, make sure you spend time with friends and all that stuff, keep yourself healthy spiritually and psychologically and physically, and then follow your passion. How's that?
That's good. And I mean, sometimes people don't know what their passion is, so they have to
experiment. Well, then you can experiment, try different things and see what moves you. My mother did that. She, in her retirement, she tried this, that, and the other thing, and she finally ended up with stained glass. She loved working on stained glass, and she had heart failure. She could hardly brush her teeth, but she could stand up for 2 hours and work on stained glass because she was so passionate about it. So
that does make a difference, right? Once you find what you love, you get into that flow. Time kind of, you said, you walk in the garden and 2 hours go by.
Right, and you ignore any physical problems.
Yeah. You do. You don't feel that until you stop, and then you're like, oh,
exactly.
Yeah. So the website for Dani Baker is enchantededibleforest.com.
That's right.
You can see some pictures from the book there. You can reach out and contact Dani if you have any questions or comments that you want to share. So it's enchantededibleforest.com. Thanks, Dani. This has been very insightful. And I love the way we kind of bridge the whole reinvention and into reinvention again, and the psychology of the plants. And the photography was awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. So next week is going to be my last show until August. I'm taking July off, and I have a very special guest for next week. His name is Jim Dant. And Jim was born Jewish, christened Roman Catholic, baptized Baptist, and received his doctorate from a Presbyterian seminary. As interesting of all of that is, what we're going to talk about is reinvention after divorce. And reinvention after divorce as a Baptist minister. There's even more. So Jim is an amazing guy. I'm sure that he's going to have insight upon insight. So that's going to be a great show. I encourage everybody to tune in for that. Please support our sponsors, roadscholar.org/heyboomer, and look for the link for Real Eats. Connect with me about the What's Next coaching. Send me an email at wendy@heyboomer.biz. And if people that would have found this show interesting but they couldn't watch, they can always watch the recording again on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn. And they can also listen to the podcast. It's going to be on all of the different podcast channels. So if you listen on a podcast, please leave a rating and a review. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. It's always a pleasure to see who's out here in the audience. And I want to remind you all to live with passion, live with relevance, and live with courage. And remember that we are never too old to set another goal or dream a new dream. My name is Wendy Green, and this has been Hey Boomer.